Welcome to the Old Laundry Theatre and the second Windermere Science Evening, Dips, Depths and Directions. My name is Taylor Butler-Eldridge and I'm a PhD researcher from the University of Exeter studying human geography. I'm funded by the Southwest Doctoral Training Partnership and the Economic and Social Research Council, who have funded this event tonight. I've dedicated the past 3 years to researching the relationships between outdoor swimming and environmental health at Windermere. I had no idea what I was letting myself in for. I only wanted to go swimming. This story continues to move, intensify, and get more complex and confusing. No doubt you will have heard of health concerns, particularly around sewage pollution and blue-green algal blooms. But what you might not have heard of is some of the ongoing research, monitoring, and the practical conservation initiatives available within the catchment. We're not here to veil any responsibilities tonight or the pressures. We're here to offer a reminder of why we need to care for and with these fragile freshwater environments. I won't be exploring this topic alone tonight. I'm excited to be sharing the space with Louise Lavictoire, the Head of Science from the Freshwater Biological Association, Ellie McKay and Steve Thackeray, freshwater ecologists from the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, Sammy Graves, Invasive Non-Native Species Coordinator from South Cumbria Rivers Trust, and Ben Surridge, biogeochemist from Lancaster University. It's a tight schedule tonight. There's no interval, but we hope to open 2 audience questions after each talk, and there will be space for more questions during the panel at the end. So let's get going. Outdoor swimming, wild swimming, cold water immersion has seen a resurgence of interest and practice. It's having a zeitgeist moment, if you like. Participation seems to be growing year on year, often motivated by exercise, competition, socialization, joy, and perceptions of restorative well-being. And there was a particular boom during the various COVID-19 lockdowns for those that had access to open waters, whilst indoor pools and lidos were forced to shut. There's also been an outpouring of autobiographical, artistic, and commercial influences, and there's more academic research coming out crossing multiple disciplines. Now, there's been a very positive framing of the psychological and the physiological responses within controlled cold water exposure and the social benefits of swimming or dipping with groups and peers, and I support that. At the same time, these understandings can carry some very universal assumptions, often neglecting the site-specific influences, broader inequities around access, and the environmental challenges, including water quality. Also, much of this research has been dominated by coastal spaces. In response, my research has questioned the social and cultural relationships between outdoor swimming and environmental health at Windermere, an iconic swimming site. To do this, I undertook a 12-month wet ethnography. I visited Rayrig Meadow and Millerground 100 times, 40 of which included swim-along interviews. This idea of a wet ethnography was inspired by researcher Clifton Evers, who explores polluted leisure. Ethnography is commonly understood as immersing within a community or space and observing social interactions. A wet ethnography included being in and out of the water, staying responsive to the different ethical questions and my personal reflections and the different stories. So I hung out with Windermere for a year, in and out of its waters, at different times of the day, sometimes on my own, other times with members of the recreational swim communities. And while there, I've been making general observations about swimming and lake activity, the water and weather conditions, sometimes recording photos, videos, diary entries, but a lot of this work involved soaking up and reflecting on feelings and atmospheres. That is also research. On top of this, I undertook 40 swim-along interviews with swimmers and dippers, a method coined by researchers Hannah Denton and Kay Aranda. These interviews question what we noticed about ourselves and around us, including our bodily responses, questions of access, community, swim safety, water quality, even swim kit. I was in the water with these people, questioning what it meant with them. There were pre, during, post-swim reflections, video recording in situ with a GoPro 10 mounted to my inflatable tow float. 6 were audio interviews on the shoreline. Together this generated over 350,000 words that I then spent 2 months analysing after the 12-month fieldwork. And after transcribing all of that, I was reading, watching, listening to it all, thinking with it, annotating, seeing what glowed. During the interviews, there was no expectation of time, distance or kit other than a tow float, and we would adapt to our needs and the weather and water conditions. Now, some participants identified as swimmers, some were dippers, some were triathletes, some were regulars, some were more casual. There were different abilities and confidence levels. Some had pre-existing health conditions, challenges, trauma. Neurodivergence came up more than I anticipated too. There were some really heavy personal motivations for swimming shared that would often outweigh their concerns of water quality. Of course, this work could also be joyful, and it felt a privilege to facilitate these reflections, and with a few exceptions, I've been shown such kindness and generosity. But it has been tough, especially winter. And then the summer, while I was grateful for the warmer temperatures, it's brought more conflict between different users and concerns of blue-green algae. There were mixed feelings, raised backs at times. There were moments where I was called out on my stance, claiming that, well, you're swimming here, so you must think it's safe. I continue to receive questions and notions of whether Windermere is good or bad. These understandings, though, cannot be rendered to a simple yes or no. As swimmers, we don't always know. Our sense of risk and care are influenced, and they're always changing. Windermere is a highly contested ecology of leisure, tourism, agriculture, residence, cultural heritage, conservation and utility, and it can get very busy on our very limited publicly available shorelines. Windermere attracts regular recreational, therapeutic and competitive swimming, but interestingly most users immersed in the waters stay close to the shorelines or jetties. Excluding events facilitated end-to-ends and those going to the buoy and back, those with their head under doing distance, still the minority, I would argue. Of course, some may swim beyond their abilities, pushing a distance or time or without a tow float or swim cap, and that can be risky. Cold water shock, after drop, mild hypothermia, still a massive concern too. But it's not just a space for swimmers or dippers. Windermere also hosts boats, powered crafts, kayaks, canoes, paddleboarders, anglers, divers, dog walkers, overnight campers sometimes too. And there are tensions between regular and infrequent users. And there are subtle tones of moral hierarchy and localism here. Some regular swimmers get frustrated at noise levels and crowdedness, yet celebrate their own meetups or events which can see huge numbers at times. Part of that tension on the shore is litter or single-use plastic pollution, which can spark at times quite toxic language and shaming. Yet the producers or government regulating these culprit materials rarely mentioned. Sometimes you find fire remnants, the remains of the night before, those not following countryside codes or values. Now, I don't excuse mindless acts, and I understand the frustrations, but these values are often learned through regular access and experience. My point is that these spaces host more than mountainous views and the colour blue. Swimming presents entangled social and environmental tensions. Swimming here can be positive and it can be negative. There can be moments of joy, playfulness, lightness, solidarity and care, and I love so many aspects of it. The gloopy watery sounds, the sharpness on your skin, the gratitude afforded by the towel and the sharing of warm tea with others afterwards. That can be really powerful. But there can also be nervy moments, knocks, heaviness, judgment, confusion and dismissal. These experiences for some can be enlivening. For others, they can make people feel small and vulnerable. We all bring something different to these spaces. Mood, stress, intentions, perceptions, we all have different identities, experiences, abilities, and bodies. And this environment is always changing. Windermere is facing fluctuating locally and globally influenced environmental pressures, which our speakers will talk in depth about tonight. The swimmers are also sharing the waters and shores with pets, bird life, plant life, fish, mammals, and other micro and macro species which are under threat from human activity. But I think we need to move away from ideas of purity, because even blue-green algae and other forms of bacteria, including from wastewater, they are part of this ecology. But unfortunately, and although their impacts can be transient, there is an imbalance and it can pose health concerns, especially in our changing climates. But the presence of swimmers also carry a trace. Bodily excretion, the chemicals on our skin, the fibres from our kit. We may swim for our own well-being, but our presence may impact others. These understandings are also complicated by the wildly different approaches taken to monitor and communicate water quality and concerns of ill health. And there are conflicting knowledges influenced by private water companies, politicians, regulators, the partnerships, ecologists, humble swim researchers, local and national activists, newspapers, documentaries, and social media is a huge, huge influence. But also these knowledges of ill health are formed within the swimming communities and of course our own accounts and our own histories. Five out of 40 participants I interviewed recalled experiences of ill health, including vomiting, diarrhea, and skin rashes following direct contact with an algal bloom or following prolonged immersion or long-distance immersion. 35 participants confidently suggested being asymptomatic. I have also never experienced these symptoms from swimming at Windermere. But that does not mean we should dismiss these health concerns. Some people might not share their symptoms. Others may be susceptible from stress, following stress or illness or other bodily conditions or complications. Also, swimming distance can churn your stomach up like a washing machine. There's so many factors, and pinpointing this really, really challenging. In terms of responsibility, some participants reported United Utilities to blame for all of this. For others, it was private septic tanks, misconnections, agricultural runoff, but pinpointing those localized sources, really hazy. Interestingly, only 4 participants mentioned climate change, and that feels really alarming to me. Now, some adapt their practice. They keep their heads above the water following heavy rainfall. Some persist, some dismiss. Some say it's not as bad as it used to be. Of course, when in the water, the sharp coldness can overpower a lot of these concerns, but many also sink their concerns to avoid conflict with their motivations to swim or even with their peers. Some feel like they must take a side within the swimming communities. So researching these social and cultural relationships between outdoor swimming and environmental health, I have found many tensions in these perceptions of restorative human well-being. And whether or not you've experienced illness, those concerns still linger. Now, I strongly emphasize keeping on the toes of private water companies, supporting farmers, supporting septic tank owners to make improvements, and demand more of our government that distributes resources and regulatory powers. I also emphasize the importance of outdoor swimming safety, practicing check, clean, dry, and the prevention of non-native invasive species, which might have slipped off broader radars. Yet the awareness and literacy towards other freshwater species sharing these spaces in general really lacking. So I would encourage us all, if we can, to get involved in volunteering, citizen science research, reading up on freshwater ecology and its local and global pressures, but also question different sources of information. That's how we build depth and equitable views within this topic. And before I wrap up, I wanted to mention the research zine that you have a copy of tonight, Swimming with Care at Windermere. This was a funded collaboration with Bethan Forsby, or Sporadic Illustration as you might know her. Give her a follow, her work is incredible. Those unaware of zines, they are self-published, non-commercial, limited run outputs. And this zine has been influenced by my research, the voices of participants, and enriched by Bethan's beautiful illustrations and her local connection to Windermere. This work has lifted me up so many times. For me, these collaborations with artists can produce really positive work within our communities. So let's keep doing this. You've each got a copy. Give it a read after the event. Bethan and I would love to hear what you think. But to wrap up, this zine and my research, not authoritative guidelines. My work generates further questions for current and potential swimming communities invested in Windermere. Swimming can be wonderful, but we also need to take notice of those with experiences of illness, injustice, or confusion. And we need to ask more questions of those with more power. Thank you so much for listening.